Hey y'all, Beth here. Um, I just came up to my office today. I brought my breakfast up here, a little bit of eggs with some Cholula sauce on it, left over from yesterday, and I was going to get some work done before I went to play tennis and got the big white dog down here on the floor. And I started thinking, I recorded a video yesterday that was intended to be a practice video. I had a list of things that I wanted to make sure that I covered, and I was just going to see how long it was. And so I started just blabbering, literally just blabbering to the camera. There she is. So, hey, sugar. Hey, sugar. Yes, she's very needy. She loves to have her head scratched. So, I started blabbering to the camera and it went on and on and on and very long. And it was very raw and quite emotional in some places. And as I woke up this morning and started thinking about redoing this video in its more refined form, like with makeup on and maybe my hair done and maybe clothes that fit because the pants I had on were two sizes too big. Um, Normally wouldn't see my pants, but you actually do in this video. So there's a spoiler alert. So I was thinking about all that and I thought, you know what? Just put it out there. It's me, natural, emotional. It's a part of my life that's extremely important to me, and I don't mind sharing that with you. So I hope that you get something out of this video, that you enjoy it. Um, it's interesting for me to go back and watch it and just what went on. But you'll see when you get there. I might divide it up into two videos because it is so long. This intro has become long, so I'm going to shut up and just let you get to watching the video. I hope you enjoy it. Hey y'all, Beth here. Um, I have thought long and hard about what I want the content of my next video to be, and I decided that it is time to go ahead and just lay it all out there. All of the things in my life and my health that have led me up to this point in my journey. So this video is a long story made longer. And I hope that you can bear with me, and maybe at the end you might glean some value from it, some information that might help you decide where your health journey needs to go from here. So, when I think back, I was a pretty healthy kid. I was a healthy teenager. Um, my mom cooked very healthy. Um, in the 1970s, she did what every good housewife did, and she switched us over to whole wheat bread from white bread. She switched us over to skim milk from whole milk, and we started using margarine, or I can't believe it's not butter, instead of butter, because that's what the health people of the time told them they needed to do. They started vilifying cholesterol and fat and started telling people we needed more fiber in our diet. So my mom cooked great. She cooked healthy meals every night, a meat, a vegetable, and a starch almost every single night. And we ate at home. She sometimes put them all together in a casserole that added some condensed soup or some dairy, and it was good. It was good food. And it was what at the time was considered to be very healthy. I remember my mom and her friends when I was little. They were tiny little women. My dad was a Marine Corps pilot, and so for the most part, my mom's friends were squadron wives, other women that lived on base when I was younger, and then when I got a little bit older, even the ladies in the neighborhood after my dad, we were no longer living on base, that aren't all military. These were little women. They were rocking the 22-inch waist. It was common. An overweight woman back then was not often seen. And now they were getting together in the evening. There were, as I recall, my mother might disagree with you, I remember frequent cocktail hours and some smoking going on. Not everybody, but a lot of them were smoking at the time too. But I don't remember there being an issue with obesity when I was a child. So we were raised pretty active. I was a very active teen. I participated in gymnastics and track and swimming. And we played outside all day long. We were sent out in the morning, told to come home when the street lights came on. We ran from house to house, riding our bikes, drinking out of the garden hose. Here in the South, where I am now, they call that a hose pipe. We called it a garden hose or just a hose back then. Um, we thrived in this environment. It was a great time to be a kid. And most of us were active, most of us participated in some kind of sports, and we were healthy. And I remember as a teenager, my comfort food was peanut butter on a saltine cracker and chocolate milk. That was my favorite thing. That was my favorite snack. And I would come home from cross country practice almost every day, or swimming practice, or gymnastics practice. And I would go straight to the kitchen, make myself some saltine crackers with peanut butter on them. I liked the premium saltines. I didn't care for the Zesta. And we were Peter Pan peanut butter people back then. Choosy Mother's Choose Jif now, but back in the day it was Peter Pan peanut butter. So I'm Peter Pan peanut butter, my premium saltine cracker, and my skim milk that I put the Hershey syrup in and made it into chocolate milk. So that was my snack almost every day. Sometimes when I came home from school, if I rode home with my friends in their cars, we would stop at the Safeway and we would get a Dr. Pepper and a moon pie. That was my treat that I would sometimes get for myself when I was not under my mother's roof. She would never have approved of the Dr. Pepper and the moon pie. But somehow she approved of the premium cracker with the peanut butter and chocolate milk. So anyway, that was my life pretty much as a teenager. I was in junior high, called it junior high back then, not middle school, around 1976, when they started genetically modifying wheat. And I know this now, I didn't know it at the time. Um, the big white dog is barking. And it was about this time in the 7th grade when I developed a rash on the back of my arms. It was a bumpy rash. Um, my gymnastics instructor called it chicken skin. And she made sure that I always had a long sleeve leotard that would cover the chicken skin on my arm. And that was a little bit embarrassing to have been called out for my chicken skin when I was in the 7th grade. No 7th grader likes being labeled as different from the rest of them, but it was what it was, and I was grateful that she recognized it and that she made sure that I was always covered. The chicken skin I noticed was always better in the summertime when I was swimming and I was getting sun and getting a tan, and chlorine kind of dried it out. And so it was better in the summertime. But in the wintertime, it was a lot worse. And I will talk about chicken skin a little bit more as we move along. It was when I was 15 that I had my first serious allergic reaction. My father had started running, he was training for a marathon, and he had started dragging me along with him on his runs. I remember one of the first marathons that he ran was the Gettysburg Marathon, and that's when I ran my first 5K. And so I got started running and started doing cross country and the like. And so he and I would go for runs together, and we were pretty evenly matched at the time. And we were on this run on this country road, and I had a serious allergic reaction. There was a farmer off in the distance that was cutting hay, and there was just this chafe in the air that we were breathing. And I had a very serious allergic reaction to the point where my father had to leave me, his teenager girl, on the side of the road. He had to sprint home about 2 miles, get the car, come back, pick me up, and took me to the base hospital. Um, he loves to tell this story because, yeah, It was not good. My eyes were swollen up, almost completely shut. My lips were swollen out to here. And my father, in his sweet, joking way, said that I looked like the Hulk. It was a big thing at the time, that show in the 70s with Lou Ferrigno and was it Bill Bixby, called The Hulk. So Daddy said I looked like the Hulk. No 15-year-old girl wants to be told she looks like the Hulk. So the time between the time when I had my reaction, he had to go home, get the car, get me to the hospital, was a pretty long time. And I stayed in the hospital for a minute. Um, they had to give me Benadryl shots, knocked me out cold. So the allergy tests showed that I was allergic to weeds, trees, and grass. Pretty much the outdoors. And what I liked about that was I was no longer the daughter that was going to be responsible for cutting the grass at the house. So I was pretty happy with that outcome. But I continued to run and do the other things that I needed to do outside with the help of allergy shots. So that was the time I started allergy shots. And that pretty much kept me where I didn't have allergic reactions, and when I did, a little chlorpheniramine or Benadryl would do the trick. And so that was not a problem. The next thing, from about the time my period started, I would get swelling in my hands and feet. My fingers would swell up pretty thick, and I have good sized man hands anyway. But my fingers would swell. If I had a ring, I couldn't get it on and off. It was very uncomfortable. I played the piano, so my fingers just felt like sausages when I was trying to play the piano. And it was very uncomfortable. And I mentioned it to our doctor one time when I went for an annual exam and told him that I was uncomfortable with that. And he started me on hydrochlorothiazide, which is a diuretic. He called it a little water pill. And I started taking the hydrochlorothiazide. I was supposed to just take it when I was swollen, mostly premenopausal, menopausal, not menopausal. I haven't had a period in so long, I forgot what they called. Premenstrual, menstrual. When my hands were swollen, I was supposed to take this water pill. But, as a teenage girl, I realized when I took that water pill, I felt thinner, my tummy wasn't swollen, my pants fit better. And I started taking that pill every day, like a good little teenage girl would do, not knowing any better. So I took that hydrochlorothiazide pill from when I was about 16 until much later, about 48 years old, is when I probably came off of that thing. So there was that. And now, okay, so I'm going to fast forward. In my college years, I was a, struggling college student, trying to stay within a tight budget, making ends meet. And I subsisted on ramen noodles and Chef Boyardee raviolios, and I like the spaghettios with meatballs. Those meatballs weren't even meatballs, but it tasted so good. And I would make myself, microwaves were new, so I would make myself a baked potato in the microwave, and I liked to top it. Somebody along the way taught me this. Top it with Thousand Island dressing. And so I would make my little baked potatoes with Thousand Island dressing, and I would eat my raviolios and my spaghettios with meatballs and my ramen noodles, and pretty much that was my diet for the next 4 years. I did gain the freshman 15, and it never really came off. So I think I went to college at about 112 pounds, and I definitely came out of college more like 130 pounds. So there was that. But once I got out of college, I started exercising again, started eating better, and got more fit, got myself back down into the 110s, and that's where I was when I met my husband. So we're going to fast forward to my mid-20s. I was still pretty fit. I was exercising regularly. I was running. I was back to running. I had started running again after college. And I was watching what I ate. I was on a low carb, No, low fat, high carb diet. Um, really being very careful about what I ate. And I was pretty darn cute when I got married at 25 years old. And then I immediately got pregnant. We had no fertility issues. My husband smiled at me and I got pregnant. But during that first pregnancy, I developed gestational diabetes in my third trimester. Now, it could have had something to do with the chocolate malts that I was picking up at Backyard Burger every day on my way home from work. And that was what I was craving. My pregnancy craving was chocolate malt, specifically had to be the malt, which by the way has gluten in it, not the regular chocolate shake. It might have been better with the regular chocolate shake, but I don't know. But those habits from high school, that chocolate milk, came back and hit me pretty hard in my mid-20s when I was pregnant. So I started following, after I got diagnosed, I started following the diabetic diet that they recommended for me and stopped stopping to get chocolate malts every day on my way home from work. And I finished out that pregnancy and delivered a healthy, bouncy, chunky baby boy, because that's what mamas with diabetes do. They have chunky little babies. And he was healthy and everything was good. With my second two pregnancies, which also my husband smiled at me and I got pregnant, they happened very quickly. And since I knew about the gestational diabetes the next time through, I was more careful from the very beginning, kind of following that diabetic diet from the very beginning, trying to keep out, some of the sugar, but still eating all of the carbs, other carbs, fruits, vegetables, large quantities of those things during those next two pregnancies. So I didn't get diagnosed with gestational diabetes again, but it was pretty much, I think, because I started following the diabetic diet early on in my pregnancies. But after my three boys were born, I had three children in 3.5 years. He kept smiling at me. I gained a lot of weight with each pregnancy. I mean, my mom told me when she got pregnant with us, they were told they could not gain more than 20 pounds. And if they gained 25 pounds, the doctor put them on a diet. With my first child, I gained 60 pounds. That was the one with gestational diabetes. With my second child, I only gained 50 from my starting point, and my third only 40, so I got a little bit better each time. But I started from a higher point each time because I never lost it in between. I went straight from nursing one child to getting pregnant with the next. So after I had my children, my premenstrual symptoms worsened. My skin worsened. I began feeling dizzy. I was very lethargic. I wasn't sleeping well. I had three small children at home, so the sleep was difficult to come by. My husband traveled, so a lot of the time I was the single mom at home, but I always had him coming home on the weekends to look forward to, and he was very helpful whenever he was home. I developed knee problems and ended up having surgery on one of my knees for condylomalacia patella, and a lateral release. And that was when I was about 30 years old, right after my third child was born. They had to repair that cartilage. I was constantly getting bladder infections from all the smiling, you know, and the doctors were always putting me on antibiotics, eventually to the point where my doctor put me on a prophylactic antibiotic that I was supposed to take all the time to prevent bladder infections. Well, of course, that then leads to yeast infections, and I had many, many countless yeast infections, and even started getting athlete's foot, and twice was diagnosed with thrush. So in the meantime, I'm still taking those water pills like crazy to try to get rid of the puffiness in my hands and my face and my feet, and my tummy were always feeling puffy and bloated. So those little water pills kept me going for a while. But when my boys were little and I had three small children under 4, I started going to aerobics and I was immediately hooked. And I think partly because they provided childcare. And so this was a little respite in my day where I could get away from the house and go up there and work out and take advantage of the childcare. And my kids got to play with other kids, and I got to play with other moms, and I got to exercise this body that was not feeling great and was a little bit thicker than I wanted it to be. So I became very hooked on aerobics to the point where I do everything to extremes. I started taking the classes and I became an aerobics instructor, and I loved it. And the trainings that we had to go to keep our continuing education up for our aerobics certification, a lot of times included nutrition training. And so I started following all the nutrition advice that they were giving in these trainings. We did all kinds of things like, Body for Life, where you basically spread your meals out over the course of a day, 6 small meals a day. And then there was one called Fat Flush. I remember the author was Ann Louise Gittleman. It was adding healthy fats in, like flaxseed oil and olive oil and some of those things, and omega-6s. And so we were, omega-3s. Those are the good ones. Omega-6s are the bad ones. I started taking omega-3s and doing stuff like that. But still, not I personally, although I eventually went out and got my personal training certificate and I was helping other people with their fitness, I never personally felt that much better. So I might have lost 5 pounds here, 3 pounds there, but I would quickly gain it back in sort of a yo-yo fashion during that point in my life. So fast forward a few more years to about the age of 38. And I decided that I was going to run a marathon. My father had run a marathon when he was 40, and I decided I wanted to run a marathon before I turned 40. And so I started training for marathon, and I applied online for a lottery system, and I got admitted to run in the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, D.C., which is kind of where I had grown up. So that was going to be fun for me to go back home and run the Marine Corps Marathon. But the more I trained, the more problems I had with bladder leakage. And so I mentioned it to my OBGYN during my annual appointment that I was having this problem, and he did some tests and he found out that my uterus, which had been, fairly abused over a quick period of time, was laying in my pelvic floor, and it had brought my bladder down with it. So, and he also, upon probing a little bit more, figured out I had a rectocele. So that's like a little bubble in my rectum that prevented things from coming out normally and naturally. So he wanted to do surgery, a hysterectomy with a bladder sling, and a rectocele repair. So I canceled my reservation to run in the Marine Corps Marathon, Semper Fi. My dad had been a Marine pilot. I was looking forward to that. And I ended up having surgery instead. So, oh my goodness. If I had known what I know now, I would never have had that surgery. First of all, I'm going to go back to this. It's going to insert this in here. Years later, when I started having perimenopausal symptoms, I read a book, What Your Doctor Won't Tell You About Perimenopause. And one of the first things they said is don't ever let them take out your uterus. So I had let them take out my uterus, and it became a problem. But what biggest problem was 2 weeks after I had my surgery, when everything was going along smoothly, over a weekend, right when my mom was getting ready to go back home, she'd been there kind of taking care of me, the boys and all that, because we got little ones, not little at that time. They were middle school aged. I think my youngest was 4th grade. So they were 4th, 5th, and 7th grade at the time. Mom was there to help with them. And I developed this really, really high fever over the weekend. And this really strange thing happened. My bladder, I thought my bladder started leaking, and I had this really, really high fever. So my husband called the doctor, and the doctor, doing what doctors do when somebody has a really high fever, called in a prescription for an antibiotic. And I took that on Fridays, on Saturday and Sunday, and I only got worse. Like Sunday night, my fever was over 104. And I literally told my husband I felt like I was going to die. So he literally carried me into the doctor's office on Monday morning, had me sitting outside the doctor's office when the doctors got there. I was quickly seen and admitted. And long story short, it took several days. But what they figured out what had happened was in the process of raising my uterus, no, raising my bladder, uterus is gone, raising my bladder in the sling, one of my ureters, the tube that goes from your kidney to your bladder, had gotten crimped off. And so the urine was not flowing from the kidney to the bladder like it was supposed to, and that ureter ruptured. And the urine was pouring out into my abdominal cavity. Well, the body finds a way, and my body found a way by creating a fistula, a tube of sorts, from the ureter to my vagina, and water, urine, was coming out my vagina. That's not the way it's supposed to happen. It's not supposed to go that way. So they fixed me up by putting a stent in my ureter so that it could remain open and patent while it healed. And I had to be catheterized, and I had to wear a catheter bag on my leg. I remember wearing a catheter bag on my leg for my son's 4th grade parent night. By the way, I was in the hospital for his birthday. He will never forgive me for that. But I also was wearing a urine bag on my leg under a dress for his 4th grade parent night. So one of my most humbling and humiliating experiences that I can remember from my young life. So eventually, I recovered from that. It took a long time, and I got back to running, which is what I wanted to do in the first place. And I did sign up for and complete the Music City Marathon in Nashville the month that I turned 40. So I met that goal of running a marathon before I turned 40. But honestly, I was so wrecked after that marathon that it took me several years before I even tried to run again. It was very, very hard on me and on my body. So all that was fixed. Ran my marathon, but I'm still lethargic. I'm still having migraines. I'm frequently having dizzy spells, but I wasn't overly concerned until one day I was driving my son home from somewhere. We stopped at a red light. That's what they call them here in Alabama. They're not traffic lights, they're red lights, but we were actually stopped, so it actually was red. We were stopped at a red light, and the world started shaking from side to side. Like, I know my eyes were looking straight ahead, but it felt like everything was doing like this. And my son was in the back seat, and I'm like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. I can't see. And the light turned green and cars started moving. So I moved forward just 20 yards and pulled into a McDonald's parking lot. And I'm sitting there, and the world is still doing this. It's going side to side like this really fast. And I'm looking at my eyes in the mirror. My eyes are, but the world's doing this. It was the scariest thing. I didn't know what was happening. My son started crying. He thought I was having a heart attack. We didn't know what was happening. Finally, I sent him into the restaurant to buy us some food because I thought, well, maybe my blood sugar's low, because gestational diabetes. Maybe this has finally caught up with me. And so we ate a little bit in the McDonald's parking lot, and I was well enough to drive home. It was just a couple miles from there. Well, those little episodes happened a couple more times. And so thankfully, the other times they happened, I was not driving. So I made an appointment, went to the doctor, and I ended up referred, ended up in a neurologist office. and eventually was diagnosed with dysautonomia with postural hypotension. And they prescribed a drug called Florinef that was going to help me um, work my way through this dysautonomia. So now that I look back, dysautonomia is kind of a catch-all phrase for sometimes things they don't know what's wrong when something's wrong and they can't figure it out. I don't know if that was the case or not, but I took that Florinef, but I'm still taking my hydrochlorothiazide, my little water pills, right? So the dysautonomia and the Florinef helped a little bit. And so now I'm on these two medications consistently. So when I was 45, I went back to the orthopedic doctor with pain and crepitus. Crepitus is crunchiness in my neck and my lower back. Like I can sit here and just do like this or just do like this, and I would hear crunch, 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 crunch. So I decided that probably wasn't normal, and I finally went to the doctor for it. After testing, they decided that I had pretty severe arthritis in my neck and my lower back that had developed bone spurs. And the doctor, a little bit gloom and doom, that doctor, I don't think I went back to him, but he said that the bone spurs in my neck were coming forward and they eventually would push into my esophagus and make it difficult for me to swallow. And the ones that were in my lower back were rubbing together in such a way that they were forming a cyst. And the cyst was pressing on my spinal cord, and that's what was causing the pain that was shooting down my legs. So he said that I needed surgery, and I needed surgery on my neck and my lower back, and they needed to be done separately, and that they would do one, and then I would recover from that for 3 months, and then they would do the other, and then I would recover from that for 3 months. So I'm 48 years old now. Let me see. My youngest is 18. There's no good time when you've got 3 kids in college to have surgery and be out of commission for 6 months. And I'm a personal trainer. So I couldn't work. So I decided I would wait until I absolutely had to have this surgery. And when I absolutely knew that it was necessary for me to recover my quality of life, that I would have this surgery. So a few years later, I reached that point. And I was walking with a limp. My back hurt, my hip hurt, my leg hurt all the time, no matter what position I was in. I got a couple of other opinions, including that of a neurosurgeon. So I went to 2 orthopedic surgeons and a neurosurgeon. And once I met with a neurosurgeon, I liked what he had to say more. Plus my mother, who was a former nurse, said, "You want a neurosurgeon, not an orthopedic surgeon." So I scheduled an appointment with a neurosurgeon to have my back surgery. And I still had one more appointment with an orthopedic surgeon that I wanted to go ahead and get his opinion. So that appointment was, later on in that week. And on my way to the orthopedic surgeon's office one day, I had to stop by my chiropractor's office. By the way, chiropractic, I do think, has prolonged a lot of this, where I would have been worse sooner if I had not had my chiropractor. So I credit him for actually helping in these situations. I know that I always felt better after going to him, but I did not go in his office for an adjustment that day. I was involved with a ministry with him and his wife, a prison ministry that they're very involved in, and I had to stop by their office for something ministry related. And while I was there, I told them, "Hey, look, I went ahead and scheduled this surgery." They were aware of what was going on with my back. I said, "I've gone ahead and scheduled surgery. This is imminent. It's got to happen. I need to do it." And so my chiropractor's wife, who is a woman of much faith, said, "Can I pray with you?" And I said, "Sure." So she said, "Let's go out to my car." So we went out to her car, and she opened up her trunk and she pulled out a vial of oil. And she looked at me and she said, there's nothing magic about this oil. This is just oil that our praise team at church has prayed over. And I would like to anoint you with this oil and lay hands on you. Are you okay with that? And I was like, sure, why not? She's just wanting to pray for me because I'm having surgery, right? So nothing weird about that. So she rubs oil on her hand. I lift my shirt. She places her hand on my back and she starts praying in tongues. Okay, so that's not my means of praying, but it is hers. And I had heard it before. And I was at once, it was one of the most awkward and yet one of the most peaceful moments of my life. I felt a calm. I felt the Holy Spirit come upon me. It was the most amazing sensation. Anyway, when she finished, I hugged her and I went on my way to my next doctor's appointment. So I go into this orthopedic surgeon's office and his people are running all the tests and doing all the imaging. And so his tech has me in x-ray, and I think I might have to stand up and show y'all this. So she has me in x-ray and she has me doing all these funny little positions so that she can see the spaces between my vertebrae. And so she says, stand up. She says, turn sideways. Can you see this? Put your hands over your head. Look straight forward and now lean back like you're going to do a back bend. And I did it. And y'all, something went in my, that was pretty funny, metal on metal at the same time. I clapped my hands. All of a sudden, in my lower back. And I saw stars and I got dizzy and I had to sit down and I got nauseated. I was like, oh my God, something's wrong. Something just happened. Thought I broke my back. I mean, I really didn't know. I was scared to death. And then as I sat there and got my breath, I went, but the pain is gone. And she's like, yeah, no, that didn't happen. I'm like, yeah, the pain is gone. So they put me in the doctor's office, waited for him to come into the room, the examination room. He was talking to me and I was telling him what had been wrong and why I was there and all that. And I said, but the strange thing is something happened while getting my x-ray done and my pain is gone. He's like, no, that's not going to happen. That's what you got. That ain't going to happen. I was like, okay, well, the pain's gone. So I went home and went on my way. So guess what? 2 weeks later, when it's time for me to have my surgery, there's still no pain. And who has surgery when there's no more pain? So I called and I canceled the appointment for my surgery. Well, my mother, bless her heart, this is where the story takes a very unusual turn. My mother and my father had planned a trip out west in their RV. And they were going to go out there and do all these things. It was like Crazy Horse and Mount Rushmore and all these wonderful things out there that they wanted to go see. And it was a big RV caravan group of people, right? So it wasn't just them. It was this big, like a convention of RV people. And she was considering canceling that so that she could come down and take care of me after my back surgery. But I had told her no, I didn't need her to do that. I wanted her and Daddy to go on. The boys were off at college. My husband could stay home with me. I was going to be fine. And so she had decided to go ahead and go on her trip. And I did not have my surgery. Well, on the morning my surgery was scheduled, we got a call that my father had been flown to a hospital in South Dakota with an apparent brain bleed. That was the day I was supposed to have my surgery. My sisters and I all lived in separate cities. We all got on separate planes and headed to Rapid City, South Dakota, where our father was in the hospital and our mother was sitting by his side with nobody that she knew around her. She was all by herself. The chaplain had spent a lot of time with her. We were very grateful for that. And we sat with my mother. And over the course of 3 days, they found recipients for my father's organs. And the 4 of us were there together when they took him off of life support and harvested his organs and saved 3 other lives. So, y'all, this started out to be a health journey. This has turned into a spiritual journey. If not, I truly believe, with all that's within me, without the faith of that precious woman, my chiropractor's precious wife, laying hands on me, praying over me, the subsequent rupture of that cyst, the subsequent canceling of my surgery, I would not have been able to be there with my mom and my sisters when my dad passed away. Make what you will of that. But I think it was God. Okay, let's get back to the subject at hand. Going through the aftermath of my father's death, and it was a lot. I won't go into. It was just a lot. Took a lot out of me. It played a great toll on my body. My hormones were messed up. My sleep was messed up. I was mildly depressed, although it seems like I might have been more than mildly depressed. But I haven't talked about this literally in 12 years. I was just physically exhausted. And I had friends that were doing bioidentical hormone pellets. And there was one doctor in particular, a naturalist, that came highly recommended. So I scheduled an appointment with her to go get these bioidentical hormone pellets. And she ran all the tests on me. I remember her saying my testosterone was so low, she didn't know how I was walking around. But all of my hormones were out of whack according to the blood test that she did. And I absolutely loved this doctor. She was, to me, the first doctor that had ever actually listened to me. She seemed to understand and even empathize with what I was experiencing. She got me started on these hormone treatments, and she also had a bariatric medicine practice, helping people lose weight. And she had this machine in her office that was a shaking machine. And you would stand on it and it would vibrate. And she said to me that anytime I was in her office waiting for my appointment, I was welcome to use the machine. So being a personal trainer, I was curious. And so I thought, well, I'll try it. And so I think about 3 times when I was there waiting for my appointment, I got on this machine. But of course, I didn't just stand on the machine. I did squats on the machine and lunges on the machine and twists on the machine and arm exercises while I was on the machine. I did all this stuff. So I really kind of felt like the machine was kind of cool. I don't know if it actually does anything to help with weight loss, but here's what I did notice. And I told her this after my 3rd time on the machine. I said, when I stand on the machine, I smell something akin to bread baking. My grandmother's apartment when I was a little girl was next to a Sunbeam bread factory. And I remember that smell. It smells so good. But when I stood on that machine, I smelled bread baking. And she was like, oh, okay. And she believed me. She's the only person that never looked at me like I was crazy. She believed me, and she ran some tests. And what she found was that I had a systemic yeast infection. My body was covered up with yeast in my ears, my nose, my mouth. Clearly, I had had vaginal yeast infections most of my life, my adult life for sure. And apparently had gotten to the point where I lived with it without realizing it. It was under the surface, right? So her being a naturalist, she didn't want to prescribe me the medicine for the yeast. She wanted me to do a very low carbohydrate diet. So she sent me home with instructions on what I should eat and not eat. And it was basically no carbs, no fruit. She said I could eat some vegetables, some green vegetables, but no fruit, no lactose, no milk, just meat, vegetables. That was it. So that's what I did, because I'm a rule follower and I do what you tell me to do. So within 3 days, I felt like a different person. I It was unbelievable. I felt like somebody had lifted a curtain and now I could see. I've heard it said sometimes that you don't know how bad you feel till you feel good. And it was at this point that I felt good for maybe the first time in my life. And I was absolutely exuberant. So when I went back for my 6-week follow-up with her, by all indications, the yeast was gone. She said I could start adding carbs back into my diet little by little. So what do? I go straight back to my comfort food, saltine crackers with peanut butter on them and chocolate milk. And within an hour of eating that, I felt like crap again. Absolute crap. And I was like, how can this be? This is my comfort food. This is what I've always gone to make me feel better. And I had no idea what was going on. So the next day, my husband brings home for lunch a 6-inch Subway sub that we split in half, the Subway Club, which I used to love. 6-inch club split in half, and a bag of Sun Chips. And I had that for lunch. And I became absolutely miserable. I had a headache. I was lethargic. And here's something we haven't really talked about much, because who wants to talk about it? But the digestive issues that I had my whole life, that at one point a gastroenterologist specialist that I had specifically gone to for this problem said that I was lactose intolerant because I have a little bit of Jewish background, and that's apparently a thing. So those digestive issues after the saltine crackers and the Subway Club came back with a vengeance. And so I was very, very uncomfortable. And so I called the doctor and I said, this is what's happening. And she said, okay, I see it. She said, I want you to eat as many grains as you can in the next 2 weeks, and then come back to me, and I'm going to do an antibody test and see if you have celiac disease. So I kept it up for a few more days, and then I called her and I said, I can't keep doing this. I said, I am so sick, I can't leave my house. I can't get off the couch. The brain fog is so bad that I can't even read while I'm laying on the couch because I can't even think. And she said, okay, forget the antibody test. We're going to assume that you have celiac disease. And she said, I want you to come off of all gluten. And she had to explain to me what that is. Don't ever eat gluten again, and you'll be fine. And she was right. So I bought a book called Wheat Belly by a guy named William Davis, and I read it cover to cover several times. And then I got one called Grain Brain. David Perlmutter wrote that one, and I read that too, and it made a lot of sense to me. So all the diagnoses my whole life, the rash on my arms, the condymalacia, the rosacea, the seborrheic dermatitis, the dermatitis herpetiformis, the peripheral edema, soft teeth, frequent cavities, breaking, chipping teeth. These are not my teeth. That's a celiac thing. What else? The dysautonomia, the arthritis, the bone spurs, plantar fasciitis, diarrhea, the fact that I had my tonsils out when I was 18 months old. All the frequent infections, the allergies, the lethargy, the brain fog, the mild depression. All of this could be explained with one diagnosis: an autoimmune disease called celiac disease. So for a minute, I was mad at the system. All these years, all these doctors, all these diagnoses, all these medications and surgeries could have been avoided if I'd been diagnosed earlier. I might still have my uterus, my tonsils, my appendix, my knee cartilage. But the dermatologist doesn't talk to the orthopedist or the dentist or the podiatrist or the gastroenterologist or the urologist or the OBGYN. They don't talk to each other. That's not the way the system works. Oh, you've got this problem, go here. And then they give you this drug. And oh, you've got this problem, go here. And then they give you this drug or this surgery. That's how the system works. The system doesn't go, oh, let's look at the whole person and see if we can figure out what the root cause of all of her problems are. That's not how it works. So for a minute, I was mad at the system, but then it took a naturalist, a woman who literally had studied under a witch doctor in Africa. It took her to figure out what the problem was. That's how broken the system is. I could have been better a lot sooner. I might not have done permanent damage to myself. I could have saved myself all those years. So anyway, once I removed gluten from my life, I did feel so much better. I felt like a new person, really. But there's such a thing as damage done. And the arthritis is still there, but less painful and seemingly not progressing as quickly as it had been. I eventually did have to have that cyst removed from my back. It turned out to be a solid mass about the size of the top of your thumb. That did have to be removed at some point. That surgery went fairly easily, no problems, thank goodness. I did not let them do the fusion on my back though, because I just felt like the fusion was not necessary. I did still have bad skin, even though all the rashes were gone. It's still very dry and it was aging very quickly. What else? I developed gum disease. I'm developing cataracts. Occasionally I still have trouble with bladder and bowel control. I still have trouble sleeping, and I was still healthy fat. So still hovering around that 160 pounds mark, running, exercising, not running anymore, but exercising, doing all the things, staying very active, playing tennis, working out, and still healthy fat. So fast forward again. It's 2021. And my middle son, Cory, is diagnosed with a devastating disease called Complex Regional Pain Syndrome, or CRPS. It's a devastating diagnosis, and it involves intense pain to the point that it is nicknamed the suicide disease, because a lot of patients who get this particular disease are in so much pain that they either accidentally overdose or they choose not to keep living. So the day that my son, Mother's Day, 2022, I'll never forget it. The day my son told me he didn't feel like he could go on living with this disease, we got in touch with a clinic in Fayetteville, Arkansas, that said they had a track record of helping people with this disease. And they were going to be able to get him in, but it wasn't going to be until December. So, but the doctor, the lead doctor in this clinic, a chiropractor by the name of Dr. Katinka Vandermeer, had written a book called Putting Out the Fire. and it was about CRPS and some of the things that cause CRPS and some treatments for it. And so what I remember from that book, what I took from that book when I read it, and Cory read it, and all of us read it, what I learned about CRPS is that there are basically 5 things that come together to form the perfect storm that can lead to CRPS. And they involve a past trauma of the spine or neck. Cory had that. A chronic or acute viral, bacterial, or parasitic infection. Remember, this is 2022, 2021, 2022. And Cory had had mono in college when he was also injured in college. So an acute or chronic bacterial, viral, or parasitic infection, an emotional trauma. I won't go into that, but check. A defective MTHFR gene. MTHFR. When you see it written, we call it the mother gene. The mother gene. And an acute injury that sets it all off. So once the pain begins, the body can't get out of sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, and it cannot get back to the parasympathetic rest and digest. So this pain just keeps on coming and keeps on coming. And it's a crushing, burning, awful pain. Let's go back. I'll come back here. Let's put a pin in that. So this MTHFR gene, the mother gene. One thing we learned about that defect is that people with the defective mother gene have trouble processing toxins and eliminating toxins. Where did Cory's defect come from? So I started researching. I went back to my 23andMe and I had to dig deep. Oh, there was a lot of weird things in there that I had to go through. But guess what? I have a defective MTHFR gene. Short story. And so I deduced that I also may have trouble processing and eliminating toxins as well. So Cory and I went very clean. We were up and we did get into the clinic. We got in sooner than December. Thank goodness. We started in June. We moved up to Fayetteville. And we were living in a hotel and we went very, very clean. Everything organic, non-GMO, lots of fruits and vegetables, a lot of fruits and vegetables. We took the Vitamix with us. We were making smoothies every morning, clean protein powders. We're doing all the things. They did detoxes on him at the clinic. They did a lymphatic detox. They did foot detox. Part of the beginning of what they do with people when they get there is get them off their medicines and get them detoxed, so that their body can then heal. So we were doing all these things thinking we were detoxing our bodies. And we thought we were doing the right thing. We were off all our prescription meds. We were taking supplements. We were doing all the right things for Cory to get well. And I was just along for the ride, helping him out, because I figured I probably had a messed up mother gene as well. So he did find remission, thank God. Thank God and Spiro and Cory's hard, determined spirit. He is the most determined person I've ever known in my life. He was not going to let this thing take him down. Thankfully, he reached remission in 4 months at that clinic. And so we moved back home and he went back to his bachelor ways. Eating pizza, drinking beer, having his friends over, watching football games, getting hyped up, getting anxious, going back to his hard exercise and going back to his job that he had to stand on his feet all day long. And he quickly started having pain again. But this time he knew what to do. And it didn't take him long before he realized that he had to come back out of that and he had to come back to a cleaner way of living. And he was able to pull himself back out of a lot of pain again. and get himself back to a point that is bearable. And that is now his baseline. He would not tell you he's pain-free, but he is living a life that is as normal as he can, given the fact that he has a chronic problem called CRPS. So after Cory got his health back together, after he came home from Fayetteville, he changed jobs. He was really kind of struggling with what he wanted to do moving forward. He was feeling led to do more to help other people who have the same thing that he has. And so he decided that he wanted to go to chiropractor school and help other people with natural ways of healing. And so he has moved to Kansas City, Kansas, south of Kansas City, Kansas, in Overland Park. And he is in chiropractor school there at Cleveland University. So Cory, like me and my father, is an information junkie. He gets that honestly. He loves to read books when he can. He also likes to consume YouTube videos for quickly digestible information. And he happened upon a video one day back in January of Dr. Chaffee talking about plants are trying to kill you. So if you haven't watched Dr. Chaffee yet, I highly recommend. But Dr. Chaffee learned in cancer biology when he was in medical school that plants are trying to kill you. They have thousands of toxins in them that cause people harm over the long run. Now, think about medicine. Most medicine we get from plants is a toxin, but it is concentrated plant toxins that we have turned into medicine. Plants on their own don't have enough toxins. Well, some of them do, like beans. You have to soak beans to get the toxins out of them. Most plants do not have enough toxins to kill you on the spot. But over time, these toxins can build up in your body and cause chronic inflammation. So Cory watched this video about plants are trying to kill you and talked about how plants inherently have these toxins, even if they're organic and non-GMO. It's a defense mechanism that the plant has to try to keep animals from eating it. And a light came on for Cory. All those smoothies, all that concentrated kale and spinach and berries and vegetables and apples and apple skins and apple seeds, because the seeds are healthy too. And all of these smoothies that we had been making, and we were just drinking concentrated plant toxins and putting them in a way that they were quickly digestible and absorbed by our system. And his broken mother gene and my broken mother gene. And so he thought, I wonder if I would feel even better if I took plants out of my life. And so he kept consuming this material on YouTube in the carnivore community, and he came across a video that Dr. Ken Berry had done about 10 autoimmune disorders that might benefit from carnivore disease. And Dr. Berry explains amino acid synthesis and protein synthesis from amino acids and blah, blah, blah. And it's a very interesting video. And so he sent that video to me thinking that I might find some good information in there about my celiac disease. So we went carnivore. Cory in the middle of January and me the 1st of February took all plant toxins out of our life. And for the first time since that elimination diet that I experienced with my naturalist when she was trying to kill my yeast disease, the veil was lifted again. And I felt completely unfoggy. I felt completely well. The inflammation started going down. My head became clear. Everything started feeling better. My joints started feeling better again. My neck feels better. I know I don't have a lot of flexibility in my neck. My lower back feels better again. Everything feels better again. And it's all because we took the plant toxins out of our life. So I don't believe that when I was healthy fat, that it had as much to do about fat as it did inflammation. I feel like I was inflamed. The swelling, the edema that was in my hands, well, that went away when I came off of gluten. I came off the hydrochlorothiazide when I came off of gluten, never needed it again. But inflammation in my face, dark circles under my eyes, all of that just went away when I came off of the plant toxins. So my husband and I had pretty much resolved ourselves that this is what it felt like to get old. In fact, he went to the doctor about a year ago and told the doctor his long list of symptoms that he was experiencing, and his doctor gave him a diagnosis: too many birthdays. I don't accept that, and I don't want you to accept that either. Aging does not have to happen the way that it is happening to people in this country right now. Aging does not have to be painful. You don't have to feel helpless. You don't have to resolve yourself to just getting worse and worse each day. I look forward to aging. I look forward to 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years from now, and I dance at my great-grandchildren's weddings. I look forward to that now. I truly believe that I have found the fountain of youth, and that when I stick to this plan, whatever level of carnivore that I need moving forward, and I'm still feeling out those waters, I truly believe that I will find a very comfortable lifestyle for the next 20, 30, 40 years. So that is my very long story about why I am a carnivore. And I intend all this to stay this way for the rest of my life. I told you, I don't have one of those I was sick and then I'm going to die kind of testimonies that a lot of people who give testimonials on carnivore sites have. I didn't have diabetes. I didn't nearly have a heart attack or have a heart attack. I don't have cancer. And yet I have never been well until the last 8 months. It's the first time I have felt well in my life. And so my story is not a story of an acute issue that needed to be healed. It's a story of hopelessness that turned into hope. And I want that for you. And I believe that this way of life brings that hope. And if you want to dive a little deeper, look a little harder, I'm here for you. I will be glad to give you resources that I have used to help me come to this. I just pray for you that you will find the health and the joy that I have found along the way. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.